right, Rio here, and it is week 11 code up. And I just finished coding up this section, which is always good because it is the way that I worked through it not quickly, honestly, even though I've done it a couple of times. So I'm recommending to you to take it a little slower, right? I'm actually using the questions as a way to kind of slow you down. But you're going to approach this however you want. And you are going to get the amount of knowledge based on your desire and your of time availability here, right? That's just true of any class. So here's my thinking of the way, if I was you, I'd go through this, is I would first read through the chapter, is to understand conceptually what you're doing. So as an example, in this chapter, this data to DOM, right? So what we're doing here is we're taking that form data for that coffee order, and and when we hit submit here, instead of moving from just console log so that we can see those objects as it exists and reiterating over that data that's in there, and now we're actually going to be placing it on the DOM dynamically. So what is the DOM, right? The document object model. So when you write HTML and CSS, that creates an object. What you see on this screen is a rendered version of the DOM. So the browser's rendering that object so that you can see it. But from the computer's perspective, there's an object sitting there. So what you're going to be doing is reaching into that DOM and updating it with JavaScript, with jQuery, with using jQuery via Java, other way around, using JavaScript via jQuery in this case. Okay, so it's really good to understand conceptually. This is what we're doing. You're updating that, and it's a lower part, so it's called pending orders. So that person in the truck, they are taking an order, they then can see the pending orders. And they also, in this case, are preventing the user in this case, the person sitting in the truck, from entering the same email twice because of the way the data is being written. And they made a decision early on to do that so you wouldn't have duplicate orders, right? So that's the reasoning. And then the second part of this, you're actually adding some dynamic. So once that hits enter, you're actually then changing your event listener, your add submit handler, so that it's doing two things. And it's very interesting to understand how it's doing that, how it's actually passing data through those doing an anonymous function, going out and grabbing that, creating that data object, and then passing it into the create order and the add row. So these questions that I'm asking you are trying to help you understand this process in here. Okay, so FYI, right? I'm just trying to help you conceptually understand what this chapter is doing. I had mentioned last time that one of the students had asked about seeing the answers, right? And I had mentioned I will still reach out to Jeff, because of all the answers I saw, Jeff did the most detail, and I could tell gave it the most time and thinking about it. So, but it's not necessarily that I guess there is a right answer, but it's really how much time have you given to understand it. And the other thing I heard was from a student who said, well, I didn't understand the question. Well, then I would have thought you would have asked. The best place to ask would be the Hangout chat. Right? So if you're waiting until the night it's due, it's hard to get help, just like anything in life. So, doing this a little ahead of schedule definitely helps. But keep in mind where we're heading, right? We're on 3 weeks until you're moving into creating something in this programming style of modules, objects, and methods. So, I'd said before, and you're going to have to make a commitment next week, so I'm going to say it again, I'm going to want to know next week, what are you going to do? I'm going to let you choose here. Are you going to choose to continue to develop your first concept that we used in 1 and 2 to then move it into the module? And you'll have to think about how you're going to do that. I talked about last time and I showed you my kitty match, how I would have to I would look at the functions to see if they would be good candidates for modules. right? And that's going to be my task next, to actually do that. And to see if that works. Does that actually work as far as laying those concepts out? Reviewing again the idea of the data store, right? And the truck, how the main is handling, how you're exposing the methods. Will all these things work in relationship to how I would need to implement the concepts? So you got to be thinking about this stuff. And if you're not, those last 4 weeks are going to be a pain for you. And that's not what I want, obviously. And I would hope to see more of you in my office, right? But, of course, this is online and you get a choice about where you have your time at. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to move over to the screen and I'm going to walk through a couple of things in my questions to make sure you understand them. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so here in the questions, right, so just scrolling back up. So the other thing is some of you are not documenting the code you're writing here, and your answers should help you very much document this code, right? But you want to document that code as you go through it. And then here's the commit points I want to make sure you've done. And then make sure, and I mentioned this last time, that when you're doing that markup file, you're actually looking at the output so that you can see if you're doing that right. And I talked about that last time. I'm going to really grade it this time because I want to make sure you're doing a correct outline, right? So makes sense that you would have this as, a subheading would be the answer, right? In this case. So if I'm just giving you that. So I want to just look down here because I know some of you are using the ebook. So I just want to kind of go over this one right here. And let me just show you the code. I'm going to switch over to my Windows side. So what I'm talking about here, let me just right here. Whew, my mouse is having all kinds of challenges here. Well, what I'm talking about is right there. It is. Not sure why. Man. Something lagging. My computer's really lagging. So what I'm talking about here is I want you to, because they're going to have you create the structure, and then I actually want you to code up because they show you, because you're not writing the HTML that's outputting when you actually take the order in and presenting it back. So I'm actually want you to write the div that shows the example as a way to help you understand when you dynamically create this in here. Okay, so I think this is important to understand. And wow, I can't believe how, hold on, I'm going to pause and see if I can get this fixed. Let's see, okay, that's a little better. So what I was talking about, oh, still pretty lagged, is here. So when I mentioned that, so when you're looking at the code and they show you, here's the HTML that you're going to dynamically write through your JavaScript in way of jQuery, that's what I want you to make sure you do. So I think this is a really good reference to understand what that code. So this is actually what you're creating, but you're creating it through code. And it is kind of astonishing to see how much code it takes to create that. I think that's definitely a part of it there. Okay. All right, I'm going to flip back to Chrome because, man, that's just being crazy. All right, so make sure you answer all these questions, right? And the most important one, and this is so important, is to understand what happens when they change that to an anonymous function calls, and how that data variable, right? How that works and how that FN is being changed at the point they actually add two calls to the add submit handler. That's an important process to understand. Okay. All right, so these are the questions that you need to do for this time, and then I am going to myself start working on what it would look like and what it would look like to convert. Let me bring you back what I said before, which was I'm going to start looking at those 4 weeks. Start at least line item major, like what I'm expecting deliverable wise on each of them. And in my way of helping me make sure I'm being clear, I'm going to use my kitty cat match to see how well that will work. And I may make a determination while doing it. Oh no, that doesn't quite work, and I can do something else. Now the other alternative, I'm just going to throw this out there, is that, and I don't know if any of you have looked at the back of each chapter, there are definitely some challenges that if you were interested, you could come talk to me. You'd have to come talk to me to do this, to actually say, here are the challenges I'd like to do for those first four. That's something else you could do. And you saw last time what I did over the summer as it relates to the development here is I actually just took the coffee run and I modified it for a different use case, right? So that's another thing you could do. Or you can extend the coffee run, right? So you could take it and say, now how would I create something beyond this? So this is why I need you to think about and commit to, and you'll see this in your next week's week 12's work, is one paragraph that talks about what your approach or what your topic will be related to this. And if you're taking your existing, I'll just repeat myself, but if you're taking the development project you started with in Develop 1 and 2 and taking it into the module area, you'll need to then adjust and add some functionality there. And it may just be that you're adding a couple things. It may be that you're adding, like I showed before, the user sign up, right? And it may mean that you're writing your data to the database based on the specific user, and then you're taking the code that you did for your prior Develop 1 and 2 and putting it in the module format. That I'm open to that, right? That's why that week of you writing that's going to be important, and it's hitting you next week, so I'm giving you the heads up. Okay, enough for me for the night. Hope you have a good weekend. By this time, you will have been too late to go, but DevFest is this weekend, so I'm looking forward to that. A guy who is a GDE, Google Developer Expert for Firebase, is going to be here this weekend, so looking forward to talking to Chris about some of the stuff I've done. Talk to you later.